I grew up in a small town outside of Rochester, New York. It was very small. There was about 500 kids in my whole entire high school. My family was great. I have loving mom and dad and three loving brothers, even to this day. My parents are still married, and I had a really good childhood growing up. And as I moved into, my high school years, I was involved in sports, and I wasn't ever really good at them, but I was all right. And I played football, and I wrestled, and I ran on the track team. Came a time in my later high school years where I just started feeling empty, like there was something missing the whole time. At that time, I had turned to alcohol. And ever since I took that first drink, I always just chased that feeling that I had that first time I ever got drunk. I never was able to find it. In my late junior year in high school, I had gotten into a car accident, and I had not been able to play sports in my senior year. And that's when my alcohol abuse really took off. And I started using it quite heavily my last year in high school. And that continued on until really it stopped working right after graduation. And I turned to using drugs, harder drugs. When I was 22 years old, I ended up marrying the girl that I was dating. We ended up having a baby together. And shortly after that, when my son was about 2 years old, my wife at the time was really tired of my drug and alcohol addiction, and she ended up leaving me. And I came home from work one day, and she was driving down the street with my son in the car. I came to a point where I found out that I couldn't stop drinking, and that really scared me. And I couldn't stop using the drugs. Although I'd go through times of 1 or 2 days without, I always went back to it, and I couldn't stop. And it was a scary feeling to have. I decided to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I started going to AA meetings and hanging out with guys in the AA rooms, and they showed me how to get sober and drug-free. That seemed to be working really quite well. But the only thing was that the only thing that I wasn't doing was drinking alcohol or using drugs anymore. One night after an AA meeting, I got home and I thought to myself, speaking to God, I just said, God, is this all that you have for me? Because I can't stand it anymore. And I asked him if he was real, to please reveal himself to me. Shortly after that, he started doing so in so many subtle little ways. And I just started getting a little bit closer, and my prayer life had changed a little bit. I had prayed for strength to get through the day, to feel better about myself. I heard about Celebrate Recovery at Lighthouse Church, and I ended up coming to one of the meetings one night. And at that time, I was kind of praying to God, God, why do you have me here, and what are you up to? That night, that first night at Celebrate Recovery, I actually found out what he was up to, because Pastor Mario, I think for his first time, was giving his testimony. And that was the testimony that I needed to hear. It so closely matched what I was feeling and what I went through. I was hanging out with a bunch of Christians and going to recovery-based meetings. And one night I remember being at a recovery-based meetings, and I think everybody thought that I had already, given my heart to Jesus. So I went up to Pastor Paul, who happened to be at that meeting that night, and I said to him, I haven't been, walking the right way, and maybe I should say that sinner's prayer again. And that night at that recovery meeting was the night that I gave my life to Jesus. And one night I was in an AA meeting, and I had met this woman, and something just seemed a little bit different about it this time. I started hanging out with her a little bit, and we started dating a little bit, and we were on the way to a spiritually based recovery meeting. And when we got there, and before we got out of my truck, she said, Rob, all of my relationships have been not so good, and judging by your track record, neither of yours. And I was just wondering, before we goof this one up, maybe we could go find out how to do a relationship in the right way. And I had to agree with her. So Rachel and I had started seeing Pastor Paul for premarital counseling. And one of the first things that he asked me was, are you guys being pure? And at the time, we weren't. And I kind of took offense to it, and I said, Paul, we're going to get married. And he said, well, he goes, I'm going to try and help you out, but I don't think it's going to be doing too much good for you unless you're walking in purity the way that God wants you to do. And I was a little bit offended, and I saw this frightened look on Rachel's face. So we ended up taking a vow of purity that night. And after our meeting, while we were in the parking lot right outside, and I saw this look on my wife's face, and it was a total look of fear. And she looked at me and she said, Rob, if I'm not with you, who are you going to be with? And right at that moment, we held hands and we prayed to the Lord for the strength to get through what He wanted us to do. And in doing so, it built such a bond between us that made us both feel like it wasn't all about the physical. It was about the respect for each other and honoring God in our relationship. And I started realizing that it really wasn't all about me, and it was really all about Him. And all those things that I used to think was my battle is really His battle, and all I need to do is look to Him. And in walking this all out, the Lord has blessed me with a terrific relationship with my son, a fabulous marriage, and I have an opportunity to be a father to 2 stepdaughters. As a result of me and my wife walking all of this out, I've seen God do amazing things in me and amazing things in my wife and amazing things in my stepdaughters. The old Rob could have never done that, but the Lord has washed me clean and made me a new creation. And every day I get to live my life glorifying His name.